I don't know what it is, but ever since I happened to catch an episode of the famed 90s OVA Tenchi Muyo on Toonami as a schoolboy, my life was changed forever. I was fully pulled in by the tale of an otherwise dull as rocks teenage boy named Tenchi Misaki, who finds himself surrounded by a gaggle of alien waifus, all of which harbour some level of raging mental illness that causes them to be down bad for some generic male anime MC. Quite frankly, I'd never seen anything like it. My entire experience of anime up until that point was watching Dragon Ball Z and waiting for Goku to finally show up so I could stop watching his friends get their asses brutally kicked. Every day at school, all the boys would be frantically discussing the fight between Goku and Frieza, or Yamcha getting cucked by the guy who basically killed him earlier in the series, but it seemed I was the only one who paid any attention to Tenchi Muyo. I religiously watched every episode, and then when Tenchi Universe and Tenchi in Tokyo aired, I watched every episode of those despite being confused as to why everyone seemed not to know each other from the other episodes, or why entire aspects of the story seemed to be completely different because I was retarded and didn't yet know how OVAs and anime series worked. This show had everything: comedy, romance, hot girls, cool villains, laser swords, robots, tea being drunk out of a sake bottle, high goddamn adventure. But in the end, there was but one thing that fascinated me and continues to fascinate me all these years later. Why did they all want this man's dick so much? Tenchi Misaki is honest to God the dullest motherfucker on the planet. He manages to score a harem of hot anime babes, plus a cute pet that transforms into a spaceship, plus child labour, and yet he just seems to want to work out in the fields all day long instead of getting, as they say in the ghetto, jiggy with it. Honestly, it made me mad as hell. Here's me as a teenager. I write, I play guitar, I perform street magic, and none of the girls will give me the time of day. And here's this drip of a fucking man surrounded by space poon practically throwing themselves at him, and he completely squanders the opportunity. Suddenly I understand why my mother always brought up starving kids in Africa when I refused to eat all my dinner. I was that starving African child. I needed my own Oxfam advertisement. For just 1,000 Dogecoin a month you can provide anime snatch to a thirsty 12-year-old Scottish boy. I was lonely, despondent, and bereft of titty as any young man could be. And yet here's this fuck spending all his time growing carrots instead of letting this cutie drain him drier than an African riverbed. And despite all my rage, I was still just a weeb in a cage. I kept watching, waiting for the moment he finally understood how good he had it. But as time went by, Toonami was replaced by the internet, and I slouched ever further towards adulthood. The adventures of Tenchi and his alien harem faded into the back of my mind. Until one day I was reminded of the show and decided to look it up and see if someone had uploaded it to YouTube. And as luck would have it, someone had. And good lord, did they cut a lot of stuff out of this show to make it suitable for children. I also found that my sympathy for Tenchi had actually grown. He was still a pretty dull and generic character and nowhere near as interesting as all the other characters around him, but here's the thing. To a young teenage boy, the idea of a gaggle of pretty girls being obsessed with you understandably holds a lot of appeal. As an adult with a reasonable amount of experience with the opposite sex, fuck it, it's still appealing, but one has a greater understanding of the reality. Imagine being Tenchi, every day having to deal with the petty, jealous squabbling of the various women with world-destroying powers who crash-landed into your life around the time when you're only just trying to get a handle on who you are. These women are constantly trying to get you into bed, and at no point can you actually do anything about that, because not only are you nowhere near confident enough in your ability to please an alien MILF, choosing one will inevitably raise the wrath of the other, only ever worsening the chaos around you. This is why a harem isn't nearly as appealing as it initially sounds, because any suitably experienced man understands that when it comes to courting various women at once, he will inevitably either end up dead or in jail. After seeing the kinds of shit Ayeka and Ryoko put this poor lad through, hell, I toil the carrot fields well into the evening too, and I don't even like carrots. Tenchi, a seemingly ordinary Japanese teenage boy, one day just says, "You know what? Fuck the system, man. I'm gonna steal my grandpa's key and take a look inside that cave he told me harbors some kind of demon. I'll bet that's where he keeps his porno stash." Naturally, it being an anime from the 90s, it's both, as the demon in question turns out to be fucking this. Be still my teenage heart. Ryoko was mine and almost everyone else's first anime crush. Sure, she emerged initially as an emaciated mummy. Sure, she fires lasers out of her hands. Sure, she almost kills Tenchi multiple times and blows up an entire school. Sure, she's basically a goddamn femme fatale from hell. I can fix her! After doing the entire township a favour by incinerating the only public indoctrination centre for miles, Ryoko ends up at Tenchi's house where his father, Nobuyuki, happens to spy the fact that his wet blanket of a son actually managed to score a hot bitch in his room. Naturally, being a good father and not wishing to embarrass his son, he respects Tenchi's privacy by immediately leaving him to— Nah, I'm just kidding. He climbs up a ladder and starts trying to videotape his son banging a demon cougar for God only knows what reason. Meanwhile, Princess Ayeka from the planet Jirai shows up looking for her missing half-brother Yosho and the demon woman he was chasing. Honestly, I don't blame him. I'd launch from this planet forever to chase this banging bitch across the universe. Ryoko beams both Tenchi and his entire fucking house onto her meowing spaceship, but they are ultimately taken into custody by Ayeka and her floating tree-log bodyguards. While Ayeka no doubt creates entire genres of hentai in the process of torturing Ryoko for information, Tenchi is released by Ayeka's sister, Sasami, a character who brings out every borderline psychopathic male protection instinct within me. She immediately gets Tenchi to sneak into her sister's room to steal a tiara off the top of her head while she sleeps, and then laughs and claps when Ayeka sets her laser blasting trees after him. Yes, I don't know if you've noticed so far, but just about every goddamn female in this show is stark raving, skin peeling, paint huffing, reading Guns and Ammo, masturbating in your own feces, fucking insane! Tenchi may be boring, but he's boring by necessity. Someone has to offset the cavalcade of crazy that is this show's female character roster. A woman just tried to have him murked by floating dowling rods because her sister wanted a piece of jewellery. You cannot reason with such creatures, and you most certainly cannot let them make you impregnate them. When Tenchi further incurs Ayeka's purple-haired wrath by telling her the truth, that her half-brother Yosho is now worm food and has been for hundreds of years, Ryoko de-escalates the situation by holding a blade to Sasami's throat and threatening to kill the little girl, and this is where my borderline psychopathic male protection instinct is overridden by my borderline psychopathic love for murderous space wenches. Don't judge her, you would do the exact same thing in that situation. I can fix her, damn it! Ryoko manages to beam herself and Tenchi back aboard her spaceship, and after a minor dogfight, they and Ayeka both crash land into Earth and predict the Francis Scott Key Bridge incident 30 years before it actually happened. Simpsons, eat your goddamn heart out. The next day, Tenchi finds himself eating breakfast with Ryoko, Sasami, and his father, who seems to be taking all this shit about aliens and stuff pretty well. Ayeka is frantically and fruitlessly trying to dig her ship out of the water, and Tenchi is left contemplating how many days of life he has left on this planet now that he's living with this group of certified mental patients who can blast concentrated energy out of their hands. And that's how it all began. All in all, a fascinating beginning to what would become a confusing universe of differing timelines, plot lines, and most likely coke lines, given some of the writing from here on out. The first few episodes of the Tenchi Muyo OVA series are well loved, and it's easy to see why. From the beginning, the story blends elements of mythology and the supernatural with sci-fi and space opera in a way that's intriguing and humorous. The character designs are unique and memorable, with each character being easily discerned from one another, often just by their hairstyle alone. The Jirai aesthetic of nature combined with, or rather acting as, technology is highly creative and makes it stand apart from later cookie-cutter examples of the genre. The soundtrack is also gorgeous, and it's one of very few anime soundtracks that I will sometimes listen to when I'm out walking about. It's that good. As I've stated emphatically, Tenchi himself is kinda dull, and this has always been a source of annoyance for me even as a kid watching this show. But there are revelations later on that make him and his family line a little more interesting, and quite frankly, someone has to stand in contrast and be the orderly at the asylum. There are later retcons that make the story kind of confusing, and it only becomes more of a mess as we move into OVAs 2 and certainly 3, good lord. But I have a soft spot for the show, so I tend to cut it some slack. So there you have it, the beginning of the anime that ruined my life. I could have been somebody, a CEO, a president, a Chad among Chads. Instead, I'm here on the internet rambling about a 30-year-old anime about a group of ageless MILFs trying to get knocked up by a teenage boy. This anime taught me more about women than both my father and Andrew Tate combined, and for that I am forever grateful. If you want me to break down the other episodes of the show, then by all means like, subscribe, leave a comment, or yell at me in the street. I've chosen this path, I may as well walk it. I'm DeadEye, and may you ride the night to the morning sun.